Hello again, back with chapter 15, which is called A Taste of Adventure. The next 2 weeks on the Frostheart were gruelling, to be sure. The Pathfinders had a shift system in place, when half the crew worked, the other half rested, all to ensure the crew could recuperate, while also keeping the sleigh one step ahead of the Leviathans at all times. This meant that there were actually only about 6 crew members doing all the work at any one time, but not one crew member slacked off their duties. Their lives and those of their comrades depended on it after all, and to stop moving, even for a moment, could mean death. Ash was more than up for proving himself to the crew, and threw himself entirely into his duties. He had to admit, however, that he thought venturing out with the Pathfinders would involve a little more adventuring, more striking out into the wild unknown and searching for his destiny, and perhaps a little less dirt, grime and soapy water. Ash bumped into Tobu, who had been letting out a low, angry grumble from deep in his throat as he swabbed the decks. It was clear Toby wasn't having a better time of it. He held his mop like a spear and stabbed at the deck. He'd broken 3 mops already. Captain Nook had got him to start crafting some new ones at night when his chores were meant to be over. The matter of Ash being a song weaver was something that went mostly unspoken, perhaps due to the crew deciding among themselves that the benefits of having a song weaver on board outweighed the risks. Kaelin, however, did not seem to share that view. She stared daggers at Ash, spitting on the deck whenever Ash caught her eyes, which would make his heart sink, not only due to her clear dislike of him, but also for the fact that he had just mopped the floor. At least all the mopping allowed his mind to wander and think up words to a new song that he had begun to work on. He began to work on inside his head. Singing to Leviathans wasn't the only singing Ash was capable of, after all. Oh, us, yes, us, we lucky few. Who makes up the Frostheart's valiant crew? Captain Nook, she leads us brave and strong. Master Pod watches over our courageous throng. It was still a work in progress. Ash would be the first to admit, and he thought better of sharing the song with everyone just yet. Perhaps when he got to know them better. When Ash wasn't cleaning the decks, he would often be found helping Twinge, the sleigh's cook, to chop the roots, vegetables and dried meats for the cooking pot in the small kitchen below deck. Twinge had a tendency to tell stories that meandered on and on, never seeming to have any point. I once had to cook a meal for a crew of 40 with only 3 knot roots and a half-rotten radish, she was telling Ash, after regaling him with the names he'd given to every single cooking utensil he owned. So, what did you do? Ash asked, cutting it into a particularly solid hunk of dried something. Oh, I just cooked 'em. Weren't too much to go around. Tasted awful, but they were the only ingredients I had. Ash had to be honest. He'd been expecting a bit more of a twist. When Ash wasn't toiling his way through Twinge's stories, he would have to help Kaelin and the other crew hands, Cobb and Arla, to keep the rigging in order. If Ash even so much as whistled, Kaelin would give him a look that suggested she was preparing to lob Ash overboard. We got enough problems that it is. Don't need no singing losing their mind to the Leviathans to add to him, she'd snarl. Ash tried his best to not let her comments get under his skin, but it was hard. He'd been hoping he'd heard the last of these kinds of hurtful words. Thankfully, aiding Luna to take notes as she plotted the Frostheart's course helped to take his mind off Kaelin, as did lending Yori and Yalla a hand at trying to keep the rust off the Sunstone engine. And then, of course, there were his continued lessons with Tobu. Archery, using empty barrels with Ulk drawn onto them as targets, much to Nook's irritation. Climbing up and down the masts and braying to the supportive cheers of Taya, the lookout, who watched from the crow's nest, and more sessions listening out for the voices of the wind and what the snow and ground had to say. Apparently, they still had nothing to share with Ash. Luna, however, was more than happy to share how hilarious she thought this all was. The crew seemed more concerned with Toby than with Ash, truth be told, giving him a wide berth whenever he prowled across the deck. This seemed to suit the Yeti fine, who was more than happy to sharpen his spear alone or work on sculpting his wooden blobs when he didn't have new mops to make, highs upon the mast during the rare moments of free time they had. Despite the hard work, Ash relished the freedom he felt among these people. He wasn't alone anymore, stuck in a small tower with only a big grumpy Yeti for company. Well, he still had a big grumpy Yeti for company, but he was freer. He had people to talk to. He felt involved, part of something. He had a world to roam, a world to explore, and search for answers in. Ash couldn't help but smile at these thoughts. Luna caught him smiling one day while Ash lounged next to her on one of his breaks. "What are you grinning about, Fireboy?" she asked, looking up from the compass she had strapped to her forearm, using a measuring stick to compare it reading to those on her maps. "Not much," Ash said. Not much, but it was the world to him. End of chapter 50.